The House of EdTech is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. The Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more, go to edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hi, this is Jamie Donnelly, and I'm here with Deb Atchison.
And we're here to talk to you today about Ed Change Global.
We're super excited about this classroom event that is going to be connecting and collaborating students and classrooms all over the world. In our past events, we've been able to connect 80 different countries, and we cannot wait to see the topics that are going to be discussed.
We are still looking for classes to sign up and facilitate sessions. So if you have something that you are passionate about and your students want to share, we would love for you to sign up to facilitate a session and share what you know with students and classes from all over the world.
During the event, we're going to have our schedule active with all the topics that you're interested in. And we're also going to have challenges happening every hour to get every classroom actively engaged in discussing different topics.
We have a lot of vendors that have signed up to help sponsor our event, and they're giving away amazing prizes to classrooms that participate in the challenges. So you'll definitely want to join us for that. You can follow us on Twitter at EdChangeGlobal, and make sure to follow the hashtag ECGC17 for all of the information before, during, and after the event.
You can also find more information about the event on the website at tiny.cc/EdChangeGlobal.
Welcome to the House of EdTech podcast. I am your host, Christopher Nessie, and the House of EdTech explores how technology is changing the way teachers teach and the impact that technology is having in education. My objectives include discussing technology that is changing our classrooms and schools and sharing tools and tips that you can hear about today and use tomorrow. I talk to teachers, leaders, and creators just like you and have them share their stories. The purpose? Whether you use it or not, technology is changing the way we teach and how our students learn. And welcome back inside the House of EdTech. This is episode number 78 of the podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of this part of your day. I really appreciate it. And what's coming up in this episode? We have, of course, the EdTech Thought, and we're going to be thinking about any opportunities we're missing. And I'm going to advise you to look up. We've got the EdTech Recommendation, and it is a great tool, especially if you enjoy reading. This is a great recommendation for book lovers. And of course, no episode of this podcast would be complete without the House of EdTech VIP. And the featured content for this episode is, of course, and finally, my conversation with James Sturtevant, and we are going to be hacking engagement. But first, before we do that, I do want to take a second to thank the sponsor for this episode, and that is summerpd.com. If you visit summerpd.com, you can expand your knowledge of Google Classroom, apps, learn more about formative assessments, and a whole lot more. They offer 10 great courses that you can get for just $25 when you use the coupon code House of EdTech. So sign up now to access the courses for professional development on your schedule. And of course, thank you to summerpd.com for all your support. It really, really helps the podcast out. So, what is new? I didn't really get to talk a lot in the last episode because there was just so much in it, and that was my review and recap of New York EdTech Week. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you go visit chrisnessie.com/77, and there are some great recommendations and conversations that I had at New York EdTech Week. That's really all the opening banter that I've got for this episode, and really that's partly because I don't have a lot of space on Libsyn left this month, I don't have a lot of space left on Libsyn this month, so I need to make this episode as tight and concise as possible. So without further ado, let us go to this episode's EdTech Thought. This episode's EdTech Thought is actually really kind of interesting. I'm going to be playing a 4-minute and 58-second YouTube video called Look Up, and it's by Gary Turk. And I heard about this video listening to a recent episode of The Real Brian Show. And if you're looking for an interesting podcast, definitely go check out The Real Brian Show. This video, I'm just going to let it speak for itself. It's really good. So keep in mind the opportunities we might be missing out on, and we do need to look up.
I have 422 friends, yet I'm lonely. I speak to all of them every day, yet none of them really know me. The problem I have sits in the spaces between looking into their eyes or at a name on a screen. I took a step back and opened my eyes. I looked around and realised that this media we call social is anything but when we open our computers and it's our doors we shut. All this technology we have, it's just an illusion. Community, companionship, a sense of inclusion. Yet when you step away from this device of delusion, you awaken to see a world of confusion. A world where we're slaves to the technology we mastered, where information gets sold by some rich, greedy bastard. A world of self-interest, self-image, self-promotion, where we all share our best bits but leave out the emotion. We're at our most happy with an experience we share, but is it the same if no one is there? Be there for your friends, and they'll be there too, but no one will be if a group message will do. We edit and exaggerate, crave adulation. We pretend not to notice the social isolation. We put our words into order until our lives are glistening. We don't even know if anyone is listening. Being alone isn't the problem. Let me just emphasise, if you read a book, paint a picture, or do some exercise, you're being productive and present, not reserved and recluse. You're being awake and attentive and putting your time to good use. So when you're in public and you start to feel alone, put your hands behind your head, step away from the phone. You don't need to stare at your menu or at your contact list. Just talk to one another. Learn to coexist. I can't stand to hear the silence of a busy commuter train where no one wants to talk through the fear of looking insane. We're becoming unsocial. It no longer satisfies to engage with one another and look into someone's eyes. We're surrounded by children who, since they were born, have watched us living like robots and think it's the norm. It's not very likely you'll make world's greatest dad if you can't entertain a child without using an iPad. When I was a child, I'd never be home. Be out with my friends on our bikes we would roam. I'd wear holes in my trainers and graze up my knees. We'd build our own clubhouse high up in the trees. Now the park's so quiet it gives me a chill. See no children outside and the swings hanging still. There's no skipping, no hopscotch, no church and no steeple. We're a generation of idiots, smartphones and dumb people. So look up from your phone, shut down the display. Take in your surroundings, make the most of today. Just one real connection is all it can take to show you the difference that being there can make. Be there in the moment that she gives you the look that you remember forever as when love overtook. The time she first holds your hand or first kiss your lips. The time you first disagree but still love her to bits. The time you don't have to tell hundreds of what you've just done because you want to share this moment with just this one. The time you sell your computer so you can buy a ring for the girl of your dreams who is now the real thing. The time you want to start a family, and the moment when you first hold your little girl and get to fall in love again. The time she keeps you up at night and all you want is rest, and the time you wipe away the tears as your baby flees the nest. The time your baby girl returns with a boy for you to hold, and the time he calls you granddad and makes you feel real old. The time you take in all you've made just by giving life attention, and how you're glad you didn't waste it by looking down at some invention. The time you hold your wife's hand, sit down beside her bed, you tell her that you love her, play a kiss upon her head. She then whispers to you quietly, as her heart gives a final beat, that she's lucky she got stopped by that lost boy in the street. But none of these times ever happened. You never had any of this. When you're too busy looking down, you don't see the chances you miss. So look up from your phone, shut down those displays. We have a finite existence, a set number of days. Don't waste your life getting caught in the net, as when the end comes, nothing's worse than regret. I am guilty too of being part of this machine, this digital world we are heard but not seen, where we type as we talk and we read as we chat. where we spend hours together without making eye contact. So don't give in to a life where you follow the hype. Give people your love. Don't give them your like. Disconnect from the need to be heard and defined. Go out into the world. Leave distractions behind. Look up from your phone. Shut down that display. Stop watching this video. Live life the real way.
And for this episode's recommendation, I'd like to recommend the library extension for the Chrome browser. The library extension for Chrome allows you to find books at your public library as you browse the internet. Currently, this plugin, when open, is supported on the following sites: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Goodreads, AR Bookfinder, and Google Books. Audiobooks, music, and movies are also supported in select libraries. If there's a library that's not supported, you can reach out to them. And for the full list of supported libraries, you can go to libraryextension.com/supported-libraries. And that's the real quick overview. What this allows you to do is when you're on one of those supported book sites, it will actually, if your library or a local library near you is supported, this plugin, when you're looking at books, will let you know what books are available at your public library. So potentially to save you money, and you can go and borrow the books from your public library, or maybe there's a series of books and you want to check out a book before you buy multiple copies of a book. This is a great way to find books that are in your area and local. And of course, again, if your library isn't supported, just get in touch with them. Go to libraryextension.com and connect with them and let them know you'd like your library to potentially be a part of the plugin. And that is the House of EdTech recommendation. And at long last, without any further ado, here is a conversation I recently had with the author of Hacking Engagement, James Sturtevant. James is a history teacher from Ohio. He has a degree in history and political science from Muskingum University and a master's in history from The Ohio State University. And he's been a high school teacher since 1985, and he's been in his current school, Big Walnut High School in Sunbury, Ohio, since the early 90s. He's the author of 2 fantastic books. The first one, You've Got to Connect, which is about building strong student-teacher connections in the classroom, and his most recent writing project, Hacking Engagement, 50 Tips and Tools to Engage Teachers and Learners Daily. He's also a podcaster, but that's not the only reason he's here. James, welcome to the House of EdTech, my friend.
Oh, it's good to talk to you, my man. Chris is one of those guys that I interact with on Voxer. He's the answer man. When I have a question, I go to Chris, and it's back to me pronto. So I'm impressed with you, sir.
Hey, that's one, thank you. And that's the beauty of Voxer. So for everybody out there who's not on Voxer, you got to get on there. It's an awesome
broadcast would not be taking place without Voxer. I would not have authored my second book if it weren't for Voxer. I have made so many friends on Voxer.
Well, why don't we start there, James?
Yeah.
How did Voxer lead to you writing Hacking Engagement?
That's a darn good question. I was on Brian Stabnick's podcast, Talks with Teachers. We had a great conversation. At the end of the conversation, he goes, Jim, you need to join our Voxer group. So I'm like, sure, why not? I thought it was kind of strange. It was like the 21st century walkie-talkie. And, I got a walkie-talkie when I was 10 years old, and it sucked. 50 yards down the road, you're getting... So I pick up this thing, and within 10 or 15 minutes, I'm like, this is pretty cool. But I didn't think I'd use it much. Well, a week later, I'm on it all the time and meeting all these people. And one of the people in the group was Mark Barnes, publisher, Hack Learning, and he and I started yakking back and forth, and pretty soon it was a relationship, online relationship. That sounds strange. But what happened after that, he said, Jim, you got to write this book for me. And so that book wouldn't be published if it weren't for Voxer. You and I wouldn't be talking if it weren't for Voxer. It has enriched my life so much. And in the book, I talk about how to use it in the classroom, which is epic. I mean, kids are excited about it as much as I am. So we might get into that.
Well, actually, well, let's stay with that. Sure. You say kids are excited. Do you have students at the high school level using Voxer with you?
Every day. I'll explain what I teach. I teach a class that is a college course taught at the high school level. I have a master's degree in history that allows me to be an adjunct professor. And so there's a local community college here I live in Columbus, Ohio, called Columbus State. They bring the class right to my high school. I am their adjunct. And we created these literature circles. And I imagine many of your listeners are familiar with literature circles. But the tough part about literature circles is getting kids to interact outside a classroom. So I made these small Voxer groups. And Chris, the engagement those kids had on those Voxer groups was off the hook. They were Voxing me. They were Voxing each other. In the midst of all those Voxes, there was actually some talk about what took place in class and what they were reading. Like last weekend, for instance, we started a challenge in my class. Had nothing to do with academics, had everything to do with connection and engagement. Who could do 1,000 push-ups? And so I had all these kids in this Voxer push-up challenge. These kids were really into it. Now, that connection wouldn't have taken place without Voxer. So there's just a lot of examples right there.
And I can speak to that. I mean, I'm in the choir as you preach on, Brother James. I'm adjuncting at Rutgers. This is my second semester doing it.
That sounds more impressive than Columbus State.
Yeah, but I'm at the bottom of the Big Ten, and you're way up at the top from the Ohio State. But this semester, I eliminated the old school discussion boards and forum threads in favor of a class Voxer group and moving our conversations to Twitter. So it's been fantastic.
And the kids, they just get it intuitively and they just go with it.
Yeah. I mean, it was like pulling teeth at first, but they're on board now and they're into it. They leave their messages.
Along those lines, and I bet you've had this experience, I have kids Vox me all the time. And a lot of times it'll be like, Mr. Sturtevant, is this due tomorrow? Or, hey, I don't understand this. The collaboration that you get, the residual collaboration you get with Voxer is really impressive.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting the side Voxes, as we say. They're asking questions of the whole group in the chat. It's great. They are engaged.
Yes, sir.
I know you're a fan of that.
Yeah. Amen.
Aside from Voxer, which is a fantastic way to engage kids, let's talk a little engagement and how you hack that. Now, I could very easily ask you and put you on the spot and say, hey, tell me all 50, and then nobody buys the book and everybody listens to this episode of the podcast. Mm-hmm. But you've selected a couple of nuggets from your book about hacking engagement. So why don't we start with your 3 hacks that relate to EdTech, which, again, my audience loves.
Well, here's the thing. I don't consider myself a member of the technocracy. But when I started teaching in 1985, which seems like yesterday, high tech was having a VCR. I mean, that was big time, baby. You had a VCR in your room. People came from down the hall to see this Marvel. Wait a minute, you can pause a movie? What are you talking about?
This fang-dangled movie machine?
That's right. I think I had a 4-head one, which made me pretty special. So when I think about the changes in technology in my 32-year career, I'm just astounded. And you can either evolve or die. And so I became convinced that I needed to listen to some of these young teachers and watch what they're doing and try to emulate what they're doing. And I found it really fun. And so my big thing on tech is, and I'm sure you hear this all the time, I'm sure you've experienced this all the time, if somebody tells me that I have to memorize another username and another password, I think I'm going to lose it. Or if somebody gives me something that I have to try to figure out, I'm really resistant toward that. So in my book, Hacking Engagement, what I tried to aim for is tech tools that you can use daily, because those are the ones that are transformative. So I'm interested in promoting ideas that will transform your classroom. For instance, when we had a guy a couple years ago say, hey, y'all, I'll start using Google Classroom. Well, I was kind of like, geez, I couldn't imagine not teaching without Google Classroom now. I mean, it just has transformed things. So I'm shooting for things that you're going to use on a daily basis. And I selected 3 ideas to come on and talk to you about this evening. And the first one is SurveyMonkey. It's a really good platform to expose them to, and it's doing a lot of the same stuff that you are doing with Google Forms. But what I love about SurveyMonkey are the visuals that it gives you of feedback, and this feedback is anonymous. When you're first starting out with it, sometimes I just like to build relationships with SurveyMonkey, and I'll ask kids advice on how I should proceed in life. So here's a good example. Been married for a long time, empty nester now, which is really interesting. My wife and I have more free time than we've had in years. So I came in and asked my students, okay, guys, I have 4 choices of restaurants where I'm thinking about taking the lovely Mrs. Sturtevant out on Saturday night. And we're talking about going to a movie afterwards. Here's the 3 movies that I'm thinking about. I gave these kids this SurveyMonkey. They love doing this SurveyMonkey. It just took a couple minutes. And I didn't take their advice.
I was going to say, where did you go and what did you see?
They wanted me to go see this violent movie. I'm not going to go that. But here's the thing. They learned a lot about me in the process. I became more approachable, which is one of the keys to connecting with students. It was just this fun little activity, and they were interacting about this stuff. It was just like small talk before you get busy. So that's one way you can use it. You can also use it. They can be your engagement coaches. They can be your engagement specialists. You can say, hey, we just taught this lesson. We tried a flipped lecture. We tried a guided reading. We tried a Socratic circle. Which one made the strongest impact on you? Which one engaged you? You can ask them that question, and you can get feedback. And here's another idea for you on SurveyMonkey. Why don't you use it as a hook? Why don't you use it as a bell ringer? Throw out a real controversial question or one that requires them to put down a short answer. You could ask them the question, something from the news. Should Muslims be restricted from immigrating to the United States? Watch what pops up. It'll be fascinating. But the thing I love so much about it, Chris, is it's anonymous.
Now with that, I'm all for helping kids, have student voice, and maybe this is a way to encourage the kid who wouldn't raise their hand and speak up, but this is a great way to get them involved.
You're right.
With that being said, what did you do to instill, I guess, good digital citizenship so that way with the kids understanding it's anonymous, that they don't abuse it or act stupid, basically?
It's always a gamble, man. I mean, it's always a gamble. I mean, like, I'm not saying that can't happen, and I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. I err on the side of expression. And right now at our school, Twitter is blocked. But it's really frustrating that Twitter is blocked, because I'd like to have a Twitter chat with my students and set them up on TweetDeck in class. The only thing that you can do is be a good role model and be persistent and be vigilant and try to deal with things as they come up. But Chris, I've always erred on the side of expression.
No, I like that. And Mr. Schoenbart on Twitter, last year he had CNN come to his high school English classroom where he was doing literature circles and inside out circles on Twitter as a Twitter chat in his class. And, CNN came and interviewed him and talked to the kids. And it just goes to that bigger issue of, one or a couple people's opinion just ruins it for everybody.
To avoid that, you can give them safe choices in a multiple choice format.
That's true.
where it's not like someone is writing some terrible thing up there and everybody's gasping.
Now, do you have students use the tool and make their own surveys or questions and choices and empower them?
Well, Chris, now that's why I'm on here, man, because you're making me think. I have not done that. That I am ashamed to admit that is something I need to do.
If they design the questions, that's less work you have to do.
You're right, man. What am I thinking? Hey, that's a wonderful idea. Thank you for that. I have not.
All right. Well, that's your homework.
You got it.
What is number 2? So that's SurveyMonkey. What is number 2?
What did you major in college?
History, sir.
Very good, man. So you wrote research papers. If you were like me, I looked at the grade on the top of the paper, probably read the first comment, and then got distracted and didn't read the other comments. Was that your experience?
Absolutely.
Well,
I don't even know if I got past the grade.
See, everybody wants to know what their grade is, and then after that, it's kind of, okay, I've got my grade. I'm not really concerned about how to set up this footnote. But what I found was that writing research papers needs to be a process as opposed to a one-time event. And a great way to facilitate this collaboration is with a tool called Kaizena. Some people aren't fans of Kaizena because it's a little tricky to use, but here's the thing Kaizena does, and it works really well with Google Docs, is it's voice grading. There is something about a voice message that carries so much more message than the written word. There's tone, there's inflection, there's the speed at which you deliver it with, there's the passion at which you deliver it with. I evaluate students' Google Docs. I'll just highlight an area, hit record, I'll talk about it, and then hit send. And these kids will get their Google Doc filled with highlighted areas with audio files right beside them. They're required to listen, make alterations, and/or respond back to me. What I found is all of a sudden, kids are actually listening to the comments that can really help them become more effective writers. Whereas I used to just write things on their paper and they would look at their grade and just kind of pretend like they're looking at the comments and shove it in their book bag. Now all of a sudden, writing isn't a one-time event. It's a process. And that process is facilitated by this collaboration that's taking place between teacher and student. And then after they've listened to the comments, you come up and you can collaborate one-on-one. And that collaboration is so much more productive because they've already listened to the comments and kind of digested them and thought about them. So I will tell you that Kaizena is a powerful tool in terms of student-teacher collaboration, student-teacher connection, student-teacher engagement, all of that.
Now, something we talked about, I think, before I hit record was, or maybe it was after, that your method is you want teachers to be able to take a tool like this or any tool that you recommend and be able to use it right away.
Yeah.
So in your experience, does Kaizena, what's the learning curve? And,
yeah,
if I'm used to writing comments by hand, will this take any more time for me as a teacher or no?
I think it takes less time because I can speak faster than I can write. That might not be the same for everyone. I don't pretend that everyone's the same as me in that regard. One thing that's really cool about Kaizena is if you teach at a Google school and your kids hand things in on Google Docs, it's seamless with Google. I mean, they get an invite code and bam, they're in. It's kind of like
I was just on the page and it said you could sign in or sign up with Google or Microsoft, so it's very easy to get in.
Yeah, it is. And once kids learn it pretty quick. The students that I've talked to say that they feel like my suggestions to them are so much more, I'm more on their side. It's less of this, red ink, bam, coming down at you. It's more like, hey, let's fix this, man. They like that. I've got that compliment a lot from students. So it's something I would really encourage teachers to explore. And, you can go on YouTube and say Kaizena instructions and they'll give them to you. I mean, like anything, it's a little awkward at first, but if you record something and you screw it up, you can delete it. It's not like it's there in stone. So I would say give it a try.
I was going to say with Kaizena, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but you also podcast, and we will talk about that too in a little bit. Have you been using Kaizena before you started the podcast? And would you say you're more comfortable on the microphone giving this audio feedback since you're a podcaster?
No, that's something that comes pretty easily for me, but I could see how someone would struggle some with that. No, I really can't say that was an issue. I mean, the microphone that I have on my desktop computer the computer mic is all I use, and I just hit record and speak, and kids say that I sound very clear, but you can always delete any message you're uncomfortable with. I just find that it's from a speed standpoint, I just speak a lot faster than I type. Maybe other people are different.
No, I think that should work for everybody.
Yeah. Well, yes. Yeah. Are you a fan of The Office?
British or American?
The American, because Pam can really type fast.
Yes.
There was an episode where she was giving Jim a hard time about how slow he typed, and I thought, that's a lot faster than I type.
Yeah, I think Jim was one of those 2-finger typers.
You got it, my man.
Oh, man. That's good stuff.
Yeah. Kaizena, Survey Monkey. You ready?
Let's go. Let's go number 3.
Number 3? Okay. I bet you can relate to this. I was in college history long time ago, over 30 years ago, and I loved history. I was a history major. But I remember I was sitting in class one day, and I was listening to this lecture, and this lecture was 50 minutes long, and I thought, wow, this is really boring, and I like history. And I looked around at my classmates, and Chris, it looked like a battlefield in there. You know, I mean, they were just
dropping left and right.
Oh, yeah. And what's crazy is I've been in some college classrooms since. Many kids have their laptops open, and they're not even remotely paying attention to the professor. You know, they're surfing the internet. I mean, they're looking at their Twitter feeds and all that. And I thought to myself, wow, college history is taught in a very passive way. I mean, it's kind of like this stand and deliver method that was used centuries ago. And so I was tapped to teach history, a college history class to high school kids about 5 years ago. I was really reluctant to do it because I thought, you know, these kids aren't going to sit and listen to me talk for 15 minutes, but that's kind of what I'm expected to do, you know. And the first year I kind of tried to do that. And, you know, it went okay, and I consider myself an engaging person, but still I felt like it was kind of a struggle to get their attention and hold it for long periods of time. Because I can tell you, when I started teaching in 1985, it was easier to keep kids' attention. It just was. I mean, attention spans have shrunk. So I was toying with this idea on how to do presentations better. I'm in this Voxer group. Here we go. And, you know, teachers are just bantering back books that they've read. And they kept coming up with this book called Presentation Zen, like Zen Buddhism, by a guy called Gar Reynolds. And I thought, wow, that sounds really interesting. Got it. Read it. Loved it. I can summarize his ideas very briefly. You should have no more than about 3 or 4 words on any slide. You should have this amazing image on each slide, and then you should ignite your storytelling ability. At the end of the presentation, you can give them a leave behind with the relevant bullet points. But what I see out of presentation after presentation after presentation is massive numbers of bullet points. Slides filled with text. Presenters turning and looking at the board and reading their own words. That's not the way to engage people. It made me question everything about the way I present. So I started to put together presentations that were filled with extremely colorful, compelling images, and then igniting my storytelling ability. Then the college that I taught for said, Jim, you're teaching these kids 5 days a week. We want you to teach them 3 days a week like we do here at the college campus. That's a big change. So I thought, okay, how about if I flip my presentations? So what I did was I created Zen-like presentations, and then I flipped them. And Chris, you know, kids are very honest with you. They'll tell you when something works, and they'll tell you when something doesn't work. My students were instantly complimentary. They said, we love these flipped lectures. I'm like, why? Why do you like that? They said, that's what we do. In our spare time, we watch YouTube videos. We like the fact that we can watch them at 3 o'clock in the morning. We like the fact that we can watch 5 minutes of them and take a break. We like the fact that we can have all kinds of crap going on while your video's going on. We like watching videos this way. It's what we do. Man, was that impactful for me. And I had a lot of kids say they liked the fact that there was these great images, and then they were required to pull out the important information and having a whole bunch of list of bullet points. So that book, Presentation Zen by Gar Reynolds, it changed the way I teach. And then,
I was going to say, I've never heard of Presentation Zen or seen this book, but somewhere it came up for me, the whole concept about, 3 to 4 words on a slide, using images, bright colors. But I never knew where I heard it, but I guess this is where it originated.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Have you ever heard of a guy called Daniel Pink?
Yes.
Okay. He's an Ohio State guy. Well, I don't know if he's an Ohio State. He's a Columbus, Ohio guy. And so my superintendent a number of years ago, she gave me this book called A Whole New Mind, which is one of his most famous books. It's all about how I always get these two hemispheres confused. I think the right brain is the creative one, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. It doesn't matter which one. The right side, the conceptual side, is going to be the star of the future. And this is this argument he's making in this book. So he rather coyly does this. And it was really cool. In the beginning of the book, he gives you this fact-based narrative. And then right after that, he tells an interesting story about John Henry, the steel-driving man that was trying to beat modern technology. At the end of the book, he challenges the reader to go back to those two stories and recall what they could. Well, guess what? The narrative that's full of facts and figures, I couldn't remember hardly anything. The John Henry story, I remember the whole thing. I remember the whole darn thing. And so then he made his point about the power of storytelling and about really stories are the way we learn, particularly in the humanities. And I'll never forget that. And it came full circle when I read this book, Presentation Zen. And so, I'm a big fan of that. And just think for a minute, a lot of times we ask our audience to multitask. We ask them to write down what we're saying, read what we're saying, look at the images on the slide, all simultaneously. Imagine if you took that pressure off people and just said, listen to this wonderful story, and then in the end we'll figure out what's relevant. That's a more compelling way to learn, I think.
That's why I'm creating a podcast. Audio is more compelling, and getting people like yourself to come on here, hey.
And then when you get the flipped aspect to it, if you're a kid and you're sitting there and you're thinking, I didn't really get that, you just rewind the darn thing.
Yeah, I mean, I do the same thing. I've said it before here on the show. I'm not a plumber. I'm not an electrician. But thank God for YouTube, or else I'd be dead.
Oh, my gosh.
With the projects I've taken on in my house.
I learned how to change a bicycle tire the other day. I've often wondered about that. Went on YouTube, found out how to do it. It was this tremendous sense of fulfillment doing that. It's like when you fix your plumbing. It's this incredible sense of fulfillment. It's like, wow, I figured out how to do that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with you at all on that.
Yeah.
Kids get that feeling too, and that's what we want them to experience. I did it. I get it. You want to see a room full of imaginary light bulbs going on all over the room when you click with them. That's
right, sir. That's right, man. So those are my 3 ideas. Those are just 3 of 50. And, these things that I talk about in the book, I've done. And a lot of times in the book, I'm talking to others who have had tremendous success in the classroom. I'd say over 30 of the hacks, I'm talking to another teacher, be it in my school or somewhere else in the United States that I've met through Voxer, hallelujah, that is having all kinds of success engaging students.
Well, I thank you for sharing these 3 tips. So obviously, those listening, you want to pick up hacking engagement to get the other 47 tips that James shares in the book. My
goal in writing that book was each one of those hacks is only about 600 words long. So I'm looking for 50 things that you can just pick up and read within 2 or 3 minutes and say, yeah, I'm going to do that tomorrow. And most of them are designed to be used daily.
Now, because it's my show, I get to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
I just thought of this question.
Go.
Of the 50, and I'll give you a second.
Yeah.
Which one do you think is the best or your favorite hack?
Okay, I'll lay it on you. I think it's Classroom Procedures Improv Night.
Go on.
Okay, first day of school is a lot like Paris Island. You just hear there's a lot of rules, baby. I mean, just a lot of them. 7 periods of don'ts, and after a while, that gets pretty old. I mean, you just a week before you were barefoot, getting a suntan.
Absolutely.
Some 55-year-old bald man telling you, when I say jump, you say how high. So I thought there's got to be a more enjoyable way to do this where I could have my procedures make a stronger impact and develop some relationships in the process. So you just break the students up into groups. You give them a rule or a procedure, and they have to demonstrate it to the rest of class. And you only give them about a minute to figure it out. And it is hysterical.
I love that.
It's full of slacker rule breakers and pretty stern authority figures.
First, thank you for sharing those 3, and I achieved my goal of squeezing one more out of you, so I win.
Yeah, you win, man.
But the other thing that you're doing, you not only have the Hacking Engagement book, but you're also the host of, and here's where we get to geek out, the Hacking Engagement podcast.
You got it.
So let's start with what made you say, hey, I'm going to podcast and pimp your show. Let's go.
All right, man. And I'm glad you asked because it was not on my bucket list. Neither was writing a book. I mean, these things just kind of evolve. But here's the thing. I went on a couple podcasts to promote my book, You've Got to Connect, and I enjoyed it. And the hosts enjoyed having me on as a guest, and we developed a good relationship. And a couple of them said, you ought to do your own podcast. And I'm thinking, I don't want to do that. That's just more work. And so I was writing Hacking Engagement, and it just hit me. Man, these hacks would make nice little podcast episodes. That's a good idea. And I talked to my producer, Mark Barnes, Hack Learning guy. He's got a great podcast. He goes, Jim, you ought to do it. So I went ahead and bought into the idea, and then I had another brainstorm. Okay, I've got a book. I've got a podcast on some of these hacks. What would happen if I put a QR code in the chapter that linked right back to the podcast? My publisher goes, that's a great idea. And so you're reading this hack on the improv night. And by the way, I've done a podcast on that one. And all of a sudden you're thinking, boy, I'd like to know more about this. Oh, here's a QR code. Bam. All of a sudden you're listening to a podcast. It just kind of evolved, kind of like the light bulb experience on the drive to school.
No, that's great. And I've listened to a number of the episodes. So,
Well,
it's good stuff. So if you're not listening to Hacking Engagement, you need to go check out Hacking Engagement.
Well, Chris, I bet you can relate to this. My original goal was to make 10 or 15-minute podcasts, and I just seem to make 20-minute podcasts all the time. It's so hard to stop talking to some of these interesting people. But the one thing I will tell you about my podcast, and I'm very proud of this, there are a bevy of student voices on there. I make a big deal about bringing kids on my podcast to talk about education because I don't think they're heard from enough.
I'm also working to try and bring students on here in 2017.
Do it, man. They're great. They're awesome. Now you can choose some ones that aren't real animated, but choose some ones that are going to be great guests. I've had great kid guests, man. I had a young lady who was born in Mexico on a recent podcast. She's a dreamer. She talked.
Oh, you shared this in our podcast group. Yeah. Share this story. This is a good one, folks.
She was great, man. She's been to about 7 different schools. She's a senior in high school right now, and she talked about being a Hispanic student in all these white schools and what that was like and how that was challenging and what it was like, what it's like, not what it is like to be a non-U.S. citizen in the United States in this political atmosphere. It was fascinating. I just sat and listened. I was just so impressed with her.
Which, for everyone who's listening, what is the title of this episode?
It's Durali Arambula, episode 27, and she's the beautiful dreamer, and she is a beautiful young woman, man. Great kid.
Awesome, because I remember you shared that in our group, and I checked that out right away, so I want to make sure that everybody else goes check out that episode.
She's great. She's great.
And where can people find the podcast?
You can just go on iTunes and type in Hacking Engagement. And this is something, you and I, we talk podcasts now and then. I'm on this platform called Spreaker, and I found Spreaker pretty user-friendly, which was important because I didn't know anything about doing a podcast probably 90 days ago. So you just learn the ropes and you just go for it.
Hey, you're ahead of so many people who have been planning their podcasts for years.
Well, the key
part, they never launch.
The key part for me was to find a sweet jam. I mean, that was just essential.
So James, before I let you go, where can people get in touch with you? What are the best ways to connect and learn more about hacking engagement? Sure. Your other book, You've Got to Connect, and just to pick your brain and be your educational buddy. pjsturtevant@gmail.com is my email. And if you email me, I'll email you back. I really like getting email from folks and talking. And then my website's jamesallansturtevant.com, and Allen spelled ALAN. So that's how you can get a hold of me. Obviously, my book's on Amazon and my podcast is on iTunes. And hey, go for it. Well, James, thank you so much for taking time to be on the House of EdTech.
Oh, it was great, Chris. I'm so glad to get to talk to you one-on-one.
Talk to you soon. Thank you so much again to James for taking time to be here on the podcast. Be sure to check his website out, and also be sure to pick up your copy of Hacking Engagement. And of course, links to all of that will be in the show notes over at chrisnessy.com/78. And now let's meet the House of EdTech VIP. The House of EdTech VIP for this episode is Dr. Scott Rocco. Dr. Rocco is the superintendent of schools in Spotswood, New Jersey, my alma mater. He's also an adjunct professor at the College of New Jersey and an instructor in the NJ Excel program. He's a presenter and co-founder and co-moderator of the worldwide and super popular SatChat on Twitter. He's also one of the founders of the Evolving Educators Group and one of the minds behind the Tomorrow's Classrooms Today conference. Scott has given keynotes, conference and group presentations on the use of social media for educators, school safety, marketing yourself, and various topics related to leadership. Scott is dedicated to positively and productively engaging educators in a dialogue that improves student learning, enhances instruction, and creates effective learning environments for all who attend and work in schools. You can check out his latest book, 140 Twitter Tips for Educators, Get Connected, Grow Your Professional Learning Network, and Reinvigorate Your Career, which can be purchased on Amazon. There'll be a link in the show notes. And also be on the lookout for a Google-related book later in 2017 that he will again be co-authoring with Billy Krakauer and Brad Curry. You can follow Scott on Twitter at Scott R. Rocco, and that's ROCCO. Congratulations, Scott. You are a House of EdTech VIP. And that is going to do it for this episode of the House of EdTech. That is 78 episodes. Put it in the books. Thank you once again to summerpd.com for supporting this episode. If you'd like to check out all the course offerings and get some on-the-go, on-your-schedule professional development related to Google and a number of other topics, be sure to head over to summerpd.com and remember to use the promo code House of EdTech and save yourself some money and get some awesome PD. Hey, let's keep this conversation going. Visit my website, chrisnessy.com/78. Over there, you're going to find the show notes for this episode, and that's going to contain all the links and information we shared today. Thank you again to James Sturtevant. Really enjoyed the conversation with James, and I'm sure I will have him back on the show again at some point in the future. And I would love to hear your thoughts on the Chrome library extension, as well as the lookup video. Now, I didn't comment on it for effect, but I would really like to know your thoughts on that. I'd be really interested to know what you think and how devices are playing a role in your life. And speaking of devices, I would love to connect with you, and I would love to hear your thoughts on the information I shared in this episode, and of course, every episode. You can do that by going to chrisnessy.com/feedback, and that's going to give you access to my email and all the different ways that you can connect with me and contact me. The fastest way, I'll tell you, is Twitter. So make sure you're following me at Mr. Nessy, MRNESI, and when you tweet to me about the show, please use the hashtag House of EdTech. That would be wonderful. It also makes it easy for me to search and find tweets about the show. Now, if you enjoy the House of EdTech, I'd like you to do me a couple things. First, tell somebody. Word of mouth is the best way to share great podcasts that you love and listen to. Number 2, please take time to rate and review the podcast on iTunes. Your positive rating and honest review will help keep the House of EdTech front and center for others to discover and enjoy. You can also show your support by becoming an awesome supporter of the House of EdTech, and you can do that by going to chrisnessy.com/awesome. Thank you as always to my awesome supporters, Jen Giffen, Peggy George, Mark Grindell, Dan Gallagher, Jeff Herb, and Brent Warner. The next episode of the House of EdTech, number 79, is going to be released on February 5th, 2017, yes, Super Bowl Sunday, and I'll be talking about creating great presentations. Until next time, thank you for joining me, and remember, using technology isn't difficult, just give it a try.